We will be inviting Ms. Lorna Tan, Head of Financial Planning Literacy of DBS Bank Ltd, to share with us on why estate planning is an integral part of financial planning, and why does it matter when it comes to retirement planning. Before joining DBS, Ms. Tan was the Invest Editor at the Straits Times for 16 years, covering finance and money management issues. Ms. Tan is also the author of 4 best-selling books on finance. So let's invite Ms. Lorna Tan, please.
Hello, thank you for joining us today. We have many important sessions lined up for you. I'm Lorna Tan, Head of Financial Planning Literacy at DBS Bank, and I'm very happy to be here with you. I'll be sharing on the importance of estate planning and how it is linked to financial and retirement planning. I know it's a bit too early to consider or talk about the prospect of death, but it is something that we will all face one day. So rather than viewing estate planning as a gloomy topic, perhaps you can consider it as a gift to your loved ones because you care. For me, estate planning has always been an important pillar of holistic financial planning. And this is what financial planning means to me. Having these key 6 components being taken care of and being well considered when you start your planning. And along in your journey of financial planning, it is good to ensure that all these 6 key components are being looked at all times. So if I look at the slide that we have here, you have being able to budget, credit management, managing your budget well, making sure you have surplus positive savings, and so on, so that you're able to set aside emergency cash, be able to ensure you're adequately insured, put your money into investments, plan for your home, of course. And of course, everybody is, would want to aspire to retire well, or what some people may call it financial wellness. And estate planning is also one of the 6 key components, as I've mentioned. So executing this holistic financial strategy well can actually help you to achieve overall financial wellness presently and also in the future. And we want to make sure that it is sustainable throughout your life. But planning does not stop when we, pass away. Estate planning comes in to help you put your last wishes in place, and there are tools out there to help you. So I'll be covering some of these tools. I don't have time to cover all of them, but you can always do your research and find out from precepts, what are the other tools that's available that can help you, because it's not there's no shoe that fits everyone, but it's a customized service that you can give to yourself to understand what these tools are. So we have wills, we have the lasting power attorney, CPF nominations, insurance nominations, and trust. So these are some of the tools available out there to help you with your estate planning. So these are the 3 questions that I've listed here that you can ask yourself, whether you have already started in your journey of looking at your estate planning, you're reviewing the tools that you have, or you're a newbie to estate planning. These are some of the questions that you can ask yourself to guide you. So how do you ensure that your last wishes will be carried out? How do you ensure that your dependents, your beneficiaries are provided for with sufficient means so that they can carry on? And if you're helping your parents or your spouse with retirement planning, with their retirement planning, bear in mind that whatever you have for them, you should also take that into account and ensure that they have the means to carry on. How do you also ensure that the maximum value of your estate will be distributed? And I'll explain why this is so important. Now, these are some reasons that I've compiled to show that, these are some of the more common reasons why people avoid or delay estate planning process. So I'm sure you'll find these quite familiar. Some people will feel that, they want to procrastinate, not knowing that it is actually quite important to do it now rather than wait. Because you never know when you're going to kick the bucket, right? So, a lot of people may think, and I can do it later, or I think I will live a very long life after I'm very healthy, right? A lot of people will be too busy, actually, especially if you're in a career, you're starting out or you're in the middle of it. Time just passes by, and then if you don't set aside time, deliberate time to do financial planning, estate planning, you will never find time for it. You will always be too busy. Or you may feel that the kids can look after themselves, so there's no need to plan on them for them, or I'll just use up all the money that I have, and when I die, there's probably nothing much left for them. That might be what some of you are thinking. Some of you may also feel that planning may cost money, so you may want to not estate plan so that you can save that money. Or there could be really some people, especially the older generation, who feel that it is bad luck to plan for death. And death is such a taboo topic. Or you may feel that you do not trust your children with your assets. So, as I said earlier, you may just want to think of spending every cent of it. But we never know when we actually may go, so it is always good to plan. So as I was looking back, why I set up my own will years ago, it was because I wanted to protect my children, who were pretty young back then. And that was the key reason why I set up my will. That was my way towards estate planning, setting up a will, doing my CPF nomination, and later on I did my lasting power attorney. So I wanted to protect my young children because I found out back then that my husband and I were booked on the same flight, to this country where we needed to go there to work for a period of time, a few weeks. And we were saying, we're on the same plane, going to the same country, and our children are still so young. If something happens to us in that country or on the plane, touch wood, then who's going to be looking after our children? We don't want to have both sets of the families fighting over the care of the children. So back then, my parents were looking after my kids, and I told my husband that if anything happens to us, I think I would prefer my parents to continue being the guardians of my children, of our children. So we set up a will to exactly state that. So that, for me, that was a primary reason why I set up a will. But there are so many reasons why you should also look at having a will, not just to protect your young children, but to protect your parents, protect the people that you want to consider having some parts of your estate when you're no longer around. Okay, so these are some of the reasons that I've put in, and also maybe you might have family members who have special needs. If you do, then you may want to consider having a special trust to take care of them as well, and also some form of CPF nomination to help them. So these are the tools: wills, lasting power attorney, to help. Lasting power attorney will come in if you're planning for, and all of us should do that, if you're planning for a situation where you might no longer be able to think for yourself, you're mentally incapacitated. So this is where you can help yourself and your parents and your people around you to also come up with a lasting power attorney to help yourselves. So what happens upon death? What is this estate in estate planning? The estate refers to all the asset classes, all the assets that you own at the point of death. So we're talking about cash, your car, your home, your insurance, your CPF savings, and your businesses, if any. So all this forms the value of your gross estate. So of course, we would prefer at the point of death that we will want to distribute this gross estate, whatever the value is, to our loved ones. Especially if you have made a will or a trust, you want to have it distributed. But there will always be some leakages from this gross estate, because even at the point of even after you're no longer around, there are still some debts, some liabilities that you need to pay off first before your estate can be distributed. So some of these possible leakages will be, any debt that you own, expenses. So if you have been, for instance, sick before or hospitalized before you kick the bucket, there will be medical bills to be paid and so on. So all these will be, a leakage from your estate, because it will be paid off from your estate before the net estate value, the amount, can be distributed to your loved ones. So there will also be things like personal income tax that you need to take care of, not you, of course, your estate, because you're no longer around. And if you have businesses, then there could be some business liabilities that you need to look at. So underlining all this, when you're coming up with your sound estate plan, or if a professional is helping you, you want to ensure that the estate plan is done in such a way that it ensures that your last wishes will be carried out. There will be sufficient capital for your dependents. And especially, as I mentioned earlier, if you're helping, your spouse or your loved ones, your parents, with their retirement planning, you want to ensure that this net estate, that's distributed to them, will be enough for them to carry on. So if you look at my case, I'm a retirement plan for my parents. Okay, I'm a sandwich generation. I have elderly parents to look after. They have very little savings. I have children to look after. So in my retirement planning, in my estate planning, I will also want to ensure that there's sufficient capital for my parents to live on, if I kick the bucket before them. So this is a very important point because for me, as I said, I'm their retirement plan. So when I'm alive, it's fine and well, and I can continue to give them my allowance every month. But when I'm not around, I face a situation, they will face a situation where this income flow is not coming, but it has to come in from somewhere, and it will be from my estate. Okay, so this is something I really need to look at. And then, of course, you want to ensure that the maximum value of your estate is being distributed. So you also want to minimize the leakages, there. So let's take a look at some of the expenses that the estate can possibly, encounter upon death. So as I mentioned before, there could be outstanding taxes. In Singapore, there's no estate duty, but if you have properties in places like US or the UK, then there will be some estate duty to be paid. Then, of course, you may have other liabilities like your car loan, your home loan, and so on, which, if you have insurance and so on, you can cover for that. Then, of course, medical expenses. I mean, we all know that the last 10 years of our life, as surveys have shown that medical expenses are always very high during the last 10 years of our life. So this is something that we want to look at as well. Funeral expenses. Something I found out during the pandemic is that funeral expenses is actually much cheaper if you don't have a funeral wake. You have an auntie who passed away last year during the circuit breaker, and instead of the usual funeral expense of $20,000, $30,000, for the coffin, the funeral wake, and getting the columbarium or the aftermath of the funeral, it may come out to 20, 30, 40,000. But because there was no wake, my aunt passed away during that circuit breaker period in April last year, so it was less than, I think it was about $3,000, for the funeral expense. So it was actually much lesser during the pandemic if you don't have a funeral wake. As opposed to another uncle who passed away at 3 nights in a funeral parlor, 3 nights with no F&B, no food and beverage because of the pandemic. It was like $12,000 funeral wake held at a funeral parlor at Lavender Street. Then there are also legal and probate fees that the estate will have to pay off, before it is being distributed. And these are necessary fees in order to get the administration of the estate, underway. And there could be other admin expenses as well. So you want to make sure that there will be sufficient cash and capital in your estate to provide for all your expenses and objectives. And of course, the objectives, as I've listed here, will be making sure there's income for your dependents, ensuring that they can also retire well if you're helping them with a retirement plan. Funding, of course, the children's education. Those with children, I'm sure will agree with me that children's education is one of the top priorities in your mind. So even if you're not around, I'm sure you want to ensure that the kids are well taken care of. And, when there's enough money to go on, especially for those who, own properties and so on, it's possible to leave behind a cash legacies for your loved ones. So these are some possible concerns when a person dies. How do I benefit my intended beneficiaries from my estate? Who are my beneficiaries that I feel I would like to give some of my estate to? How will it benefit them, and so on? Then you may wonder, will my spouse and children automatically inherit my estate or inherit my assets? How is it done? If I don't have a will, how is it being done? Do they automatically inherit it? What about? Then can my spouse retire well if I don't do a will, for instance, or a CPF nomination? How is the distribution of my estate being done? And if it's done that way, is it possible that my spouse will retire well? They're all about my parents. Am I able to cater for my parents if I don't do a will? As I said, in my case, are my parents' retirement plan. So I definitely have to look into the needs of my parents. Even after my death, I have to make sure that there's some planning for them. So I want to ensure that my estate can fund their retirement too, in my case. What about my nieces and nephews, my godsons, my goddaughters? I will also want them to benefit from my estate to further their studies. And I also have, my church that I would like to gift to. So for some of you, it could be your temple, or it could be your favorite charity that you wish to gift to as well from your estate. So these are things that you may think about while you're still alive, and you can do something about it, So let me show you a scenario where there is no will. And this is the Intestate Succession Act for non-Muslims that govern the distribution of a person's estate. So I'll go through line by line. For some of you, maybe it's the first time that you're looking at it. And it's quite an interesting table. So looking at the first line, if there is an individual who dies, leaving behind a spouse, but has no children and no parents, okay? The spouse will then get 100% of the person's estate. Okay? If looking at the second line, if the individual dies leaving behind spouse and children, the spouse will get automatically 50%, and the children will get the remaining 50% to be shared equally among them. Now the problem here is if you have children, if you have parents, you will also, and if you are like me, you have to look after your parents as well, then this act doesn't really cater for your parents, right? If you have spouse and children, looking at the second line. So basically your spouse will get 50%, your children get the other 50%, then there's nothing that's going to your parents as indicated by this act. So it is very dicey, your parents are left with nothing from your estate because the law says, 50% goes to spouse and 50% goes to children. So this is something you may want to look into. Okay, if you have children and parents, no spouse, then the children will be the first priority. They actually will share the 100%. If you have spouse and parents, no children, spouse will get 50% and the other 50% will go to the parents and it's shared equally among them. So you can see the priority is the spouse who gets that 50%. Then going down the line, if you have parents, no spouse, no children, parents will get it 100%, your estate. If you have siblings and their children, then the siblings will share it equally. If you have grandparents and none of the rest, grandparents will get it and shared equally among grandpa and grandma. If you have uncles and aunts, no grandparents, uncles and aunts will get it 100%. If you have none of the above, then our dear government will get 100%. Okay, our akong will get 100%. So bear in mind this table. If you happen not to have any of the estate planning tool like the will or your CPF nomination and so on. So this or trust. These are the pecking order that the Intestate Succession Act will rely on. Now, what is a will? It's a legal document executed by you. We will call you a testator, declaring how your estate is to be administered and the assets distributed when you are no longer around. Okay, so what are some of the benefits of writing a will? I think the first benefit is very clear. You can distribute according to your wishes. So you can have a list of beneficiaries. You can indicate what their gifts are. It can be in the form of an item or in the form of specific cash amounts. And by doing so, you can minimize conflicts. So I know of a family, another distant auntie of mine who has 5 children. But out of the 5 children, only 2 are like filial, and the rest do not give her any pocket money. And she has 1 daughter, the youngest, who is single. So the rest are already married. So in her will, she stated quite clearly that, yes, I have 5 children, but I want to leave everything to my last child, which is the daughter. And the other sons are, and daughters are agreeable to that. But there's one son that doesn't give her any parental allowance, so he's not aware of this will. So, but if the will is stated clearly that she has 5 children and she wants to simply, give everything to the youngest child, then it will minimize conflicts when the son who's not given anything and who hasn't been giving her any parental allowance and who's not aware of the will comes back and argue against the will. That will help to minimize conflicts. Of course, if she doesn't write a will, what happens? Then her estate will be divided between her husband and the 50% to the children, right? And which means much less will go to the daughter. But now she wants to give everything to the daughter. So you can also appoint guardians, which is what I did in my case when my kids were younger. And of course, you have to appoint executors and trustees if need be. And all this, the benefits of writing a will will definitely help you to speed up the distribution process, help you to avoid delay and so on. And it will also minimize unnecessary costs. So if you have a will that dictates who to give to, where your assets are, you don't have to, your estate doesn't have the extra leakage of having to spend money on looking out for where your assets are and having to secure them and so on, or looking for your beneficiaries if you're around the world. So it actually helps to minimize a lot of unnecessary costs. It also helps to avoid problems relating to common disaster. So a common disaster may refer to a situation where a couple dies at about the same time, say on a car accident or in a plane crash. So if this couple doesn't have a will, what will happen is the older person who dies will be assumed to be the person that dies first. Okay? So if you look at an example of a husband and wife, and the husband is older than the wife, and they both die in a plane crash, and there's no way you can determine who died first. The older person, who in this case is the husband, is assumed to have died earlier by law. And his estate will then flow. Remember the table earlier? They have no will, no children, they have parents, assuming. Then his estate will flow 50% to his parents and 50% to his wife. Right? And then the wife, of course, has also passed away. But in this case, now she has her estate has ballooned because her husband's estate, 50% went to her estate. So the wife is assumed to have died later, right? So now she's like the person who has died later. So her estate, her bigger estate now would have gone all completely to her parents, which means that her parents will now have, more money than the husband's set of parents. So, I'm sure some of you would think this is unfair. So having a will help to eradicate that kind of problems. So what are the factors to consider in writing a will? You will definitely need to appoint executors and trustee, depending on your scenario, but definitely you need to appoint your executors. And I will advise you to appoint people who hopefully are financially savvy, able to manage money, and able to have the ability to contact lawyers to help them if they don't. Also good to appoint children's guardians if you have children below 21, which is what I did in my case. And make it very clear who the guardians are. Make a list of assets and where they are. So for me, I also have a list of assets on, what bank accounts I have, what funds I have, my insurance policies, properties, and so on, and contact persons. So having a list of assets will help the executor do a more efficient job. When I kick the bucket, and he's able to consolidate all these together and do the distribution. Of course, make a list of beneficiaries and your gifts to them. So these can be specific gifts. It can be in the form of cash, lump sums, or a percentage of something, or it can be specific gifts like a piece of jewelry to your favorite godchild or your favorite nephew or niece. The testator is yourself. If you're writing the will, you're known as a testator. You must be above 21 and above, and you should also have 2 witnesses to witness the signing of the will, and all 3 of you should be at least 21 years old. Okay? Bear in mind that the beneficiary or the spouse of the beneficiary should not be the witness. Okay? And please review your will periodically. Since I made my first will, I have reviewed my will several times already. Because along the way, some of my beneficiaries could have passed away, or I have new assets that I want to include into my will, or I want to change the distribution structure. So I have done all my review. So along the way, I've also helped my parents, my in-laws do their will as well and review them where necessary. Excuse me. We all know that our CPF savings is such an important component of our retirement plan. Because most of us will, if we have been working, most of us will have CPF accounts. Even if you're not working with your child, you have CPF accounts as well. So with these retirement savings in our CPF accounts, it is useful to know, if you don't know already, that you cannot use your will to distribute your CPF savings. Okay, CPF savings have to be distributed via CPF nomination. Okay, so if you do a CPF nomination, have a good understanding on what is covered. So what's covered will be your CPF savings in your ordinary, special, Medisave, and retirement accounts. Okay? Unused CPF life premiums, if any, will also be covered. So if you're 65 and above, you already pick your CPF life plan, and you will. And the unused CPF life premiums, in the lifelong income fund will also be distributed via CPF nomination. What's not covered will be properties bought using your CPF savings, payouts from DPS, which is a protection, the dependence protection scheme, which is a form of term insurance, investments under CPF investment scheme. If you have used your CPF savings to invest, it is also not covered under CPF nomination. So for that, you will need other tools to help you. So bear in mind that the most part of your CPF savings will be covered by CPF nomination. And if you look at the slide, the second point there says, if there is no valid CPF nomination, distribution will follow the Intestate Succession Act. Okay, so you will follow the table that I showed you earlier on if you do not do a CPF nomination. So what are the CPF nomination options? Most people will probably go for cash nomination, but bear in mind that there are actually 3 options that you can use. So the first one is cash nomination, which is by default if you don't pick, if you don't decide on whether enhanced or special needs savings, by default it will be a cash nomination. If you do a CPF nomination, of course, you must first of all do a CPF nomination. And under this cash nomination option, this means that your nominees, the people, your beneficiaries in your CPF nomination form document, they will receive your CPF monies due to them, as indicated in your nomination. They will receive it as cash, okay, either by check or by online transfer. Okay, so that's very simple. The Enhanced Nomination Scheme, ENS nomination, this is where you can decide if you feel that your beneficiaries are young, or they may not know how to handle a big sum of money, you may wish to have maybe the more savvy one receiving it via cash, or the less savvy one receiving it via ENS, the Enhanced Nomination Scheme. So this is where you can indicate which CPF accounts of your recipient that the money will go into. So you can do one or two. You can either indicate the special account, or you indicate the Medisave account. So if you have indicated the special account, meaning that if the recipient is below 55 at the point of your death, you will go to her special account. And if it reaches the full retirement sum in the special account, which is $186,000 this year, the prevailing full retirement sum in that year, then you will move on to the Medisave account. Medisave account, the basic healthcare sum this year is $60,000. Okay, if there's any more excess beyond that $60,000, then it will come out as cash. Okay, so $186,000, $60,000, then it will come out as cash. If you choose for your beneficiary to receive it under Medisave account, then it will go firstly to the Medisave account, and if the amount exceeds $60,000, which is the BHS this year, the basic healthcare sum, then you will move on to the special account, and then it will come out as cash. Okay. So for those with special needs children or members in the family, you may want to consider the Special Needs Savings Scheme, and this is where you can nominate your children or family members to receive your CPF monies on a monthly basis under this scheme. Okay, so these are the 3 possible nomination options that's open to you. And this is one point that I want to flesh out, that if you do not do your CPF nomination, you will be charged these amounts of admin charge. Okay, there will be admin charge on your CPF savings. So if you don't do your CPF nomination, for the public trustee office to distribute on your behalf, according to the intestate law, they will be, before they distribute, they will be charging these amounts on your CPF savings before they distribute. And this is a slide to give you some information on how you can do your CPF online nomination, and please do it today or soon. The last tool that I'll talk about is the lasting power attorney. So this is something where, while you're still of sound mind, you can appoint people whom you can trust to take care of your affairs if and when you lose mental capacity. So in Singapore, 2020, 78,000 people aged 60 and above are already living with dementia. And we're looking at 100,000 people aged 60 and above living in dementia in 9 years from now. And this is a very serious problem because mental capacity is something that may affect some of us. And it may not also affect just the older people, but it may also impact younger people as well. Okay, so it's also good to do a lasting power attorney and not wait till you're older to do it, because who knows, you may also get a stroke before you're old, and if you have a stroke or because of an accident you're unable to mentally think for yourself, then it's good you have this tool to allow the people you trust to handle your money. Okay, so the lasting power attorney will allow you to appoint donees to help you to look after your personal welfare and your property and affairs. And how do you set out your lasting power attorney? You can go to the Office of Public Guardian website, download the forms. There's Form 1 and Form 2. Most of us will probably just need the Form 1. Form 2 is for those with more complex, customized wishes. Okay? So these are some of the steps that you can do. So to round up, these are the 5 more common tools in Singapore. You have the will, you have the CPF nomination, lasting power attorney, insurance nomination, and trust. And I will say that for the average person, for most of us, we will require the will, the lasting power of attorney, and of course, CPF nomination. And an insurance nomination as well. So the will and CPF nomination will take care of your estate after you've died. But the lasting power, and of course insurance nomination also after you've died, 1 through 3. But the lasting power attorney will take care of your monies, your estate, before you kick the bucket. But you cannot think for yourself. So it is good to have a lasting power attorney to manage your monies and make sure they're not all willfully squandered, before you kick the bucket and there's nothing left in your estate. So it's good to have this synergy and have, at least these 4 tools to look at. And of course, consider talking to a professional if you're looking at a trust. I've written 4 books. These are the 2 books that also include a lot of financial tips, including retirement planning, estate planning, and so on. So they are available at the bookstores. You can also buy them online. And I've also have articles and financial planning articles in the DBS website called the NEF.sg. We also have a financial planning tool called the NEF Planner, which you can go to the DBS website and learn more about it and use it. So I thank you very much for your time, and this is my contact if you wish to contact me. And I wish you a very pleasant 2 days ahead of you, and learn a lot more, and please help yourself to enjoy and live a good and fruitful life with plenty of financial wellness. Thank you very much.